You can unmute yourself. That's not done yet. Sven, the floor is yours.
So this one, and do you see my presentation?
No, I think you need to click on share screen somewhere.
Okay. Actually, share screen, and this one. Okay. Do you see it?
Yes.
Okay. So let's start. Okay, so the topic of my presentation is the diagnostic harness for the revision 586220 diagnostic software. I just want to introduce myself a bit. So I was born in 1965 in Germany. I started hobby electronics in 1979, and 1 year later, it was my first Commodore computer experience. And I kind of got stuck with programming, computers, and that. So I was writing business software for the Commodore 8632 from between 1980 and 1991. I have studied electronics in Munich on the at the Technical University. After that, I became a hardware developer, and my my back to the Commodore computer hobby was in 2018, and since then I have released quite a lot of open hardware projects on GitHub. So the diagnostic revision with a long number is a diagnostic cartridge software, which is provided by Commodore for service purposes and maybe for testing and production, which I don't know. It tests the RAM, the PLA, it tests ROM, which is kernel, basic, and character ROM. It tests the interfaces and timers and interrupts, and it does a basic sound test, which is just an audible thing. You have to listen to it. And it will test all generators and all voices and stuff like that, but it doesn't test the filters. So you get yourself a diagnostic cartridge and insert it into your perfectly working C64, and then this happens. You see a lot of bad ICs, of bad devices. And this is very often seen on social media, and people are just desperate because they say, oh, 2 bad CIAs, that totals to €60, and a bad SID that will then sum up to €120 or even more. I don't know the prices nowadays. The thing is, the software requires a diagnostic harness, and this is this one. This is as shown in the C64 diagnostic instruction and troubleshooting manual from Commodore. And as you can see, it has this cable harness assembly, which is not really a fun thing if you want to build it. Cable making is never fun. So, okay. This is a picture provided by Eric Atkins of exactly this harness. And he has a C64 cartridge, and he also has a C128 cartridge. So you know, okay, you can use the same thing for testing a C128. He's lacking the keyboard PCB already. So my goal was to make a harness for the masses and not the classes. Today, it's desirable to have a diagnostic harness for a couple of reasons. Number one, there is no Commodore repair center anymore anywhere. You know, you have to do it yourself, or you have to know somebody who could do it. You might want to test a C64 that you just bought for your collection. And the next thing is you might want to prove your C64 that you want to sell on eBay or somewhere else works flawlessly, so you can get a better price. So I think today is a higher demand for diagnostic harnesses than back in the 1980s. The goal of developing the harness was that probably a little to medium experienced maker can build it. This was my revision 0. The development is based on information that I have retrieved from worldofyanni.com. In particular, the schematic drawn by Peter Scheppers in 2009. It was probably reverse engineered. I don't have any more information about it. So the thing is, I want to use easy to get components. All cables are ribbon cable based. No crib tools are required, no cable soldering, and only through-hole components, because sometimes the gentlemen here don't like to solder surface mount devices. Okay, so you can see there's a user port dongle, which we also have in the Commodore harness. There's a cassette dongle, which is something new. The purpose is just you can connect it with the ribbon cable to the user port harness. The keyboard dongle is like we had it before. There's an IEC bus dongle because it's really easy to make. You only have to put 2 wires, install 2 wires. And the user port to control port cables are all ribbon cable based. Okay. So this is how you make the ribbon cables. You just need a vise. You insert the ribbon cable into the connector and then you squeeze it. Finally, you can install a strain relief because you will, well, probably plug and unplug the cable many times. So a strain relief is a really good thing to have. It's the same with the D-sub connector. It's also insert the ribbon cable and squeeze it with your vise. Do not use the rainbow ribbon cable, because I have seen it a couple of times that it does not fit the grid. And I had sent Adrian from Adrian's Digital Basement a set of PCBs for the harness, and he wanted to make ribbon cable. He was using exactly this type of stuff, and as you can see, it will cut the wire everywhere, but it just does not fit. So this is a picture of the first harness. That was in March 2019. And a little bit later, I had a 3D printer. So I was creating and printing cases for the harness components. So I love block diagrams. So I've drawn one. And this is the block diagram of the original harness. You see, this is the cable assembly, the cassette connector, IEC bus connector. It's all connected to the user port. And the difference of my harness is like that. You know, we don't have this because it's easy to make. We have on the cassette dongle, we have a motor LED. So you can see if something is going on, even if the monitor is dark, you could see the motor LED going on and off. You also have a an alternative power LED on the keyboard dongle, because usually, you know, you install the keyboard dongle and you take off the keyboard and the whole upper part from the C64, and you don't have any power LED anymore. So if you have this, you can see your C64 switched on or off, which is, I think, a great thing, because you don't want to work on a switched on C64. Okay. A couple of months later, I think it was actually a year later, somebody from Turkey reported to me, there's a problem with your harness. When I just don't install the analog switches, the ICs on the user port dongle, then it works perfectly. So what happens? If you have a look at the schematic, you see that the keyboard and the control ports are sharing port signals. So what actually happens if you have the user port dongle and the keyboard dongle installed is that the user port dongle might switch, but the keyboard dongle always short circuits the switches. So what is nowhere described in the manual is that you should test C64 first with the keyboard dongle and then just do a second pass without a keyboard dongle. And which is actually, this fact is described in the C128 service manual. So the solution is switch both feedbacks. And with the same software, I didn't change anything about in the software. So I have the switch off for the user port, which is testing the control ports, and for the keyboards, and both are switched. So alternatively switched, so you can do it in one pass. This is this led to revision 1 of the harness. What is Q is a cable to the between the keyboard dongle and the user port dongle, because you want to switch the feedbacks. And there's a sense LED on the cassette port dongle, plus an edge connector, as you can see here. And this is still the same nowadays. So the sense signal will just change between some passes of the diagnostic software. There has been an evolution of the harnesses. A revision 2 came, well, probably half a year later, because I had to reorder PCBs and I was thinking of what can I improve. So the improvement is, if you have a SX64, it does not have a cassette port. You need to switch the control port feedbacks manually, which is done by this switch. So this is all in revision 2. Revision 3 is not yet released on GitHub. It has actually an additional light show. We have a voltmeter for the 5 volts. We have a presence LED for 9 volt AC, and we have a presence LED for 5 volt DC. The reason is, if you have like a fancy power supply with a voltage indicator or voltage voltmeter on it, the number is completely irrelevant. You know, it does not make sense, the number, because you want to know the voltage inside the C64. You have a voltage drop over the cable, you have a voltage drop in the DIN connector, and you have a voltage drop maybe in the switch in case it's not really good anymore. So the user port is a good place where you measure the internal voltage of the C64. This is how it looks. The case became a little bit bigger, and yes, this is the diagnostic software. We have the ribbon cable to the cassette port dongle. We have the ribbon cable to the control port dongle. This is the IEC port dongle and the two control port ribbon cables. Those are the PCBs, the printed circuit boards. I have made an SMD version of it in revision 2, and I've continued it in revision 3. The reason for the SMD version is because Retro Rewind in Canada is kind of mass producing the diagnostic harnesses, and he has a pick and place machine, and yeah, that it helps him a lot to reduce the time building the dongle, which is then helping to sell it for a cheaper price. That's the diagnostic cartridge. My first diagnostic cartridge was based on the Versa C64 card, and I had the idea to combine the dead test and the diagnostic into one cartridge. And finally, I have made a simple version because the other, with the Versa card, it requires to solder cables, which we don't like. And so this is the cartridge. It has a really low part count. It only has an EEPROM capacitor, 3 resistors, an LED, which is, well, if you want it or not, and reset switch, which I think is pretty important, and it has 2 slide switches, and that's it. So it's really simple to build, and it's really cheap to build, and there is nothing fancy on it either. The only thing that is required is an EEPROM programmer, which is like 40 euro nowadays. Okay. This is the harness connected to a C64, which is the ASCII number 250 for 69. So the keyboard is here. Usually the keyboard connector is on the left side. This is the voltage indicated. It is actually, it's pretty interesting to see the voltage, because when you jiggle the power cable, you will see how low it can get. It still works with 4.3 volts, but this depends on the C64 too. I once had a C64 that did not work with a straight 5-volt input. Okay, the user port dongle, the cassette port dongle, IEC bus dongle, keyboard dongle, diagnostic cartridge, and that's it. So we have a good pass in the diagnostic. Everything is okay, so this is what you want to see. The next thing I already mentioned, that you could test the C128 with it. It requires a different diagnostic software, of course, and it requires a different keyboard dongle, because the keyboard, yeah, it's not the same like in the C64. This is it, connected to the C128. The keyboard dongle is in the case that I have 3D printed. It is provided by Retro Rewind CA. He has sent me his data, so I could print myself one. the diagnostic cartridge, and the keyboard dongle. Okay, so this is how a good pass of the diagnostic software looks like. This is really a screenshot of the C128. It takes quite a while. As you can see, one pass is almost 2.5 minutes, which is most of the time is the RAM test. So my resources for this project was the world of Johnny.com. The harness hardware is on my GitHub. I have scanned the C64 and C128 diagnostic instruction and troubleshooting manuals, which is definitely a recommended read, because if you don't understand what it tests and how it reports, you might feel confused by the results you see. So I have put that on my archive.org page, and you can also find it like at zimmers.net or something. It is in several places, maybe not the same version that I have done. Okay, and my website is this one. Oops. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Sven. I don't know if there are any questions from the attendees. I'm looking at the chat. I don't see.
I don't have a question, but I just have one remark. I was wondering how I recognize your name. But basically, some time ago, I just bought, somebody in Poland did it, but this is your design. It's audio video breakout. It's a brilliant thing. I mean, as you said, making cable is never fun. I made several by myself, but I mean, they usually fail. This never fails.
Yes, I'm king of adapters.
Yeah. This looks especially good with a flat plane SD2 IC together plugged in the back of my bread bin. It looks just nerdish.
Yes. Oh, I have plenty of those.
Yeah.
This is for the 128.
Yeah.
128.
This is
I don't
for
know.
the
Yeah.
Big 20.
Yeah.
This is for the C64.
664.
And
there must be different layout for each computer, because the arrangement of the ports is different, and this will
for the C64 and the C128, it is just different because the ports, the IDE port and the IEC port and the video connector are swapped. So this is just the reason for the different geometry. And I really appreciate when people build my stuff and sell it, because then I don't have to do it, because my my building time goes off my project time, and I actually prefer project time.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm looking at the Facebook, but there is no questions there. I had two. The first question: Do you have any idea of how many people have built it so far, considering all the revision? So 012.
I think it was built in the hundreds, if not in the thousands. I have like 150 stars on that GitHub page, and I know that that Retro Rewind mass produced it, and he's selling it for, I think, a pretty fair price. I mean, there's always work in it, and he sells it for like $79, the harness. So I think it's really a fair price.
Yeah.
I was selling mine for cheaper.
And then you need to spend your weekend on that and not on the.
I don't know. I just don't want to make a profit, because then I would have to do something about taxes, and I don't want.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Good. You mentioned release 3, but it's not yet released. By when do you expect to have that one?
Or probably end of the month.
Okay,
I have
for Christmas.
pretty much prepared everything. I just need to do some documentation, and when I have released it, I can throw away my revision 2 boards because everybody will want the light show.
Yeah.
And
Good.
I have the same for the VIC-20.
Oh, nice.
Another software, of course, and another dongle, but it shares the diagnostic dongle for the cassette port. It shares the cables, and so you only, if you have it, you only need this and the diagnostic cartridge to run it on a VIC-20. And one of my next projects is this one. It's a diagnostic clip for the PET.
Oh, nice.
Which is a little bit further away from release.
Good. Any more questions from the attendees? Seems not. Okay, thank you. Then I will stop the recording.